The first light of dawn. It told ancient builders when to plant, when to harvest, and across the world, they built these structures, 25 of them, that we know of, and they all line up with the sky. With solstices, equinoxes, star patterns, locked into stone, civilizations separated by oceans, they built the same thing, the same celestial calendars. There's a tomb in Ireland. It only lights up inside for a few minutes, once a year, and in Peru, a desert fortress. It uses 13 towers to track the sun. Like a giant stone clock, these silent ruins, they're a story about looking up, about needing to find meaning in the cosmos, a family outside at night, long before writing. A parent points up, tracing a shape in the stars, a hunter, a bear, a serpent, and the sky changes. It becomes a map, a calendar, a place for gods. That impulse to find order in the stars, that's where this begins. Why would cultures everywhere build mountains of stone to mirror the sky? The first reason is in the ground, survival. Knowing when the sun turned north told you when to plant. Predicting the winter solstice meant preparing for the cold. This wasn't theory. This was life and death data, carved into the land itself, but calling them just farming tools misses the point. For the builders, the sky was sacred. The sun was a god, a force that needed honoring. The moon ruled time and tides. Stars were ancestors or spirits. So an alignment wasn't just a marker, it was a doorway, a moment when the world and the divine touched, allowing for communication, for renewal. This study, archaeoastronomy, ties astronomy's measurements to archaeology's insight. It asks not just how a structure aligns, but why it mattered to the people. It shows a shared leap. Different cultures under the same sky alone came to the same monumental answer. They built permanent proof of their link to the cosmos. They built to make the infinite feel close, and they left a question, not just how they built it, but what they felt when that first solstice light hit the dark corridor they'd made. What were they saying to us and to themselves about where we belong? The question of intent is the puzzle. How do you prove a stone from 5,000 years ago was meant to catch a sliver of light on one specific morning? You don't start with theories, you start with measurement. Teams use precise instruments, theodolites, laser scanners, to map every angle of a monument. They build a digital model accurate to the millimeter. Then they wind back the clock. They account for precession, which is the slow wobble of the Earth's axis over 26,000 years. The stars our ancestors saw are not the stars we see now. The whole sky has pivoted, so the software has to recreate the exact sky as it was over that hill 4,000 years ago. And then you can see if a window or a corridor or a single standing stone framed the rise of a particular star or the solstice sun. It's detective work, but on a celestial scale. But even with a perfect alignment, the debate is only half over, because then you ask, was this a practical tool, a sacred symbol, or both? Some researchers, the functionalists, they argue these were observatories. Calendars, they point to sites where the alignments clearly mark agricultural cycles or lunar phases. Others caution against that. They say we can't view the ancient world through a purely modern, scientific lens. For these cultures, the line between the practical and the spiritual didn't exist. A sunrise that signaled planting time was also a moment of divine return. A star's appearance might mark an ancestral spirit's journey, imposing our categories, science versus religion, onto their worldview. It can blind us. One scholar put it gently. He said we should try to listen to the stones instead of telling them what they must say. And that tension between precise engineering and profound symbolism, that's what gives these sites their power. They were built by people who saw the universe as a single, interconnected story, and they carved their chapter right into the bedrock, the hills in Ireland's Boyne Valley. They're green, they're damp, and they hold a secret. It's older than the pyramids. There's a massive mound there covered in grass, Newgrange. It was built over 5,000 years ago. And it's not just a pile of earth, it's a passage tomb, a place that meant something deep to the people who built it, and its design shows you something. A breathtaking intention. Above the entrance there's a small opening, a rectangular slot. They call it a roof box. For most of the year it's just dark. A quiet detail in the stone, but for a few mornings, around the winter solstice, something happens. The sun rises in its lowest, weakest arc, and a narrow beam of light comes through that roof box. It travels down a passage 60 feet long, lined with stone, built with a precision that's astonishing. For about 17 minutes, this beam of light, this golden shaft, it reaches the central chamber. Deep inside the mound, a space that otherwise only knows permanent darkness. And you think about the engineering, the Neolithic builders, they had no metal tools. No written plans. They moved 280,000 tons of stone and earth. They shaped these massive curbstones. Some of them are decorated with spirals, diamond shapes, maybe representing the sun or a journey of the spirit. They calculated the angle of the midwinter sunrise with such accuracy that the alignment still works today. It's a testament to their skill in watching the sky. This wasn't a lucky accident. This was a monument built to capture a moment, a specific moment of cosmic connection. The meaning of it is profound. The winter solstice, it's the shortest day, the longest night. In the depth of that darkness, the sun appears to stand still, to die before it's reborn as the days start to lengthen. For an agricultural society, this was the turn of the year, the pivotal turn, the promise of life's return. By designing Newgrange to flood with light at this precise moment, the builders created a powerful symbol. They brought the reborn sun into the heart of a place. A resting place for their ancestors. It connected the cycle of the heavens with the cycle of life. It suggested renewal, continuity, a sacred dialogue between the living and those who came before, and the cosmic forces that governed their world. Newgrange stands as a starting point, a perfect, poignant one. It shows us that from the very beginning, this was about more than marking a date. It was about weaving the rhythm of the sky into the fabric of human memory and hope. From the chamber at Newgrange, you go to a plain in southern England, to that circle of stones everyone knows, but that shape, that silhouette, it's just the surface. There's a deeper story there, a story of purpose that lasted over 1,000 years. The people who started it and the ones who came after, they weren't just putting up a monument. They were tuning a kind of machine, a machine to talk to the sky. You stand in the center of that circle on a summer solstice morning. You face northeast. And you see it, the sun at its farthest north breaks the horizon. It comes up in a perfect line, right over the heel stone off to the side. From that center, the first light of the longest day pours through the big arches. The trilithons, a gateway of light made by stones that weigh 20 tons. That wasn't an accident, that was the finish line of centuries of work. The history of the place is like layers. The first layer, about 5,000 years ago, was simple, a ditch and a bank in a circle. But inside that bank, they dug a ring of pits, 56 of them. We call them the Aubrey holes. For a long time, nobody knew why. Then a pattern emerged. The moon moves in a complex way. It has a cycle, 18.6 years long, where its rising and setting points swing wide. It seems those 56 holes could have been a counting system. Move markers between them, and you might predict a lunar eclipse when the moon turns that deep, coppery red. So that adds something. Stonehenge is famous for the sun, but from the very start it had a lunar secret. It watched the moon just as closely. Then came the blue stones. Smaller stones but full of meaning, they came from the Preseli Hills in Wales. That's over 150 miles. Getting them here by land or sea or both was a huge task. Why do it? The simple answer is probably the right one. Those hills were likely sacred. The stones themselves were thought to have power. So for a place meant to be an interface with the cosmos, you needed stones from a charged place. A spiritual source which tells you the alignment wasn't just a technical thing, it was a ritual thing. The architecture had to be precise to the sky, and the materials had to be right for the cosmos. What you get is a picture of a society completely tied to the sky. They tracked the solar year with the solstice alignment. They followed the subtler lunar cycle with their Aubrey holes. And they brought in materials from a distant, holy place to seal the connection. Stonehenge wasn't one idea set in stone. It was a living project. It shows a culture that saw the sun and moon moving as the heartbeat of their world. And they built a permanent gateway to stand and feel that heartbeat for generation after generation. That journey from the spiritual heart of England takes you to a quieter place. An older place, a field in Germany. For centuries it was just a wheat field, but in the early 90s the story changed. Aerial surveyors saw a pattern from above. A faint circle in the crops, the plants grew differently inside that line. It was a ghost image, a memory in the soil, the Goseck circle. Archaeologists started to dig. And what they found rewrote the timeline. This ring of earth and wood was built around 4900 BCE. That makes it older than Stonehenge by 2,000 years. Older than the pyramids, it's the oldest solar observatory we know of. The structure was simple, purposeful, a circular ditch about 250 feet across. Inside that, 2 rings of wooden posts, and then the key, 3 gates, one to the southeast, one to the southwest, one to the north. The southern gates are the revelation. They aren't just openings, they're narrow corridors, precise. If you stand in the exact center of the circle on the winter solstice, you watch the sunrise through the southeast gate. Hours later, you watch the sunset through the southwest gate. The same for the summer solstice, just in reverse. This was a calibrated instrument, a giant sighting device. Timber and earth built to capture the sun at its extremes. The evidence inside adds layers. Researchers found cattle bones placed carefully, broken pottery. Signs of fires, so the circle was more than an observatory. It was a gathering place, a community center. For those early farmers, the solstices weren't abstract events. They were the turning points. The winter solstice meant the sun's return, the hope of spring planting. The summer solstice marked the peak of growth. A time before the harvest, Goseck provided the date, the precise signal from the cosmos, and the community would come together inside that aligned space. They'd share food from those cattle, conduct ceremonies by those fires, reaffirm their connection to the cycles that fed them. Its age is what's powerful. It tells you that building monuments aligned to the sky isn't a late development. It's a foundational impulse. Europe was still in the early Neolithic. Communities were just settling into farming, and they already had a systematic understanding of the solar year. They invested that communal effort to build a permanent marker for it. The Goseck circle is a quiet whisper. It says that from our first steps into a structured life with the land, we looked up. We tried to anchor our lives, our seasons, our communities to the reliable clockwork of the heavens. The Orkney Islands, north of Scotland, a place of dramatic skies and ancient stones. There's a great grassy mound there, rising from the flat plain, Maeshowe. A chambered tomb built by Neolithic farmers about 5,000 years ago. From the outside, it looks like a simple hill, but the entrance tells a different story. A long, low passage leads into the heart of the mound, and this passage points precisely to the southwest. For most of the year, that corridor is just a dark tunnel. But for a few weeks around the winter solstice, something happens. In the late afternoon, as the sun sinks to its lowest point, the the light aligns perfectly with the passageway. A beam of orange-red light shoots down the length of the corridor. It floods the central chamber for a brief time, strikes the back wall of a small side cell. This isn't the hopeful sunrise of Newgrange. This is the dramatic, fading light of the setting sun. The builders chose this alignment with clear intent. They captured the sun at its moment of departure, not its return. If the rising solstice sun symbolized rebirth, then the setting sun might have represented completion. A journey's end. For a tomb, that alignment is profoundly fitting. It connects the resting place of ancestors with the solar cycle at its most poignant turn. The sun, at the year's weakest point, offers its last light to the chamber's interior, a symbolic escort, a final illumination for those on a journey to whatever lay beyond. The tomb becomes more than a structure. It becomes a timekeeping device, marking the year's deepest point with a direct beam of celestial light. Centuries after it was built, the tomb gained a second chapter. Vikings navigating these seas took shelter in the mound during a storm. Inside, they left their mark. They carved runes into the stone walls, dozens of inscriptions. Some are simple names, others boast of treasure or tell of a great crusade. One even complains humorously that the rune carver was left to tend a fire while others went exploring. This later graffiti is a snapshot of a different culture encountering this ancient place, but it also highlights the enduring power of the site. The Vikings sheltered there, but they didn't understand the original alignment. That Neolithic intent to marry architecture with astronomy for a sacred purpose remained silent beneath their words. Maeshowe stands as a powerful counterpart to Newgrange. One greets the newborn sun of midwinter morning, the other receives the dying light of midwinter afternoon. Together, they show a sophisticated understanding. A culture that saw the entire solstice day, from first light to last, as a sacred continuum, a day to honor the full cycle, from ending to beginning, all within the silent, stone embrace of a tomb built to last. Maeshowe's fading light has a kind of parallel on the other side of the world. In the coastal desert of Peru, there's a place called Chankillo, a fortress built about 2,500 years ago. And it has one of the most straightforward solar calendars ever found. It's not a single doorway, it's more elaborate than that. The builders put 13 towers along a hill crest. They're rectangular, like giant stone teeth, spaced evenly. They make this jagged line running north to south, and to the east and west of this ridge, they built 2 observation points. Simple structures, walled with narrow windows, that's where the system works. If you stand at the western point at dawn, you watch the sun rise in the gaps between the towers. Over the year, the sunrise point shifts along the horizon. At the June solstice, it rises at the very north end of the tower line. Then day by day, it moves south. By the December solstice, it's rising at the southernmost end. Then it moves back north again. Each tower corresponds to a specific date. The whole ridge is like a giant stone ruler, measuring the sun's annual path to within a day or two. You could do the same from the eastern point at sunset, watching the sun set behind the towers. It was a public calendar, unmistakable, carved right into the landscape. That clarity is what makes Chankillo important. In this arid place, the calendar wasn't for farming. The sun's position didn't signal rains or planting seasons. Those didn't really exist here. Instead, researchers think it's scheduled ceremonies. The site has a fortified temple. There's evidence of offerings, gatherings. It suggests a sun cult, a society that organized its ritual life, its community and devotion around the precise movements of their main deity. The sun itself, the towers gave them the dates. They told the priests and the people when to gather, when to celebrate, when to reaffirm their bond with the cosmic order. Chankillo is some of the strongest evidence in the Americas for architecture built specifically for astronomy. It was built over 1,000 years before the Inca. That challenges the idea that precise solar science was a late development here. This was a pre-Incan culture, looking at the same problem as the builders of Newgrange and Goseck, how to track the sun, and they came up with a different solution. A brilliantly logical one, not a hidden beam in a tomb, an open, mountainous calendar for everyone to see, a fortress in the desert, but first a fortress of time. A public calendar is one answer, but on a small island in the Mediterranean, the builders chose something else, something more intimate, Malta. The islands there are covered in megalithic temples. They're among the oldest freestanding stone structures anywhere, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, and at a place called Mnajdra, the lower temple has a secret. A secret of light and shadow. The temple is a series of curved chambers built from massive limestone blocks. The architecture is corbelled. They stack the stones, each layer leaning slightly inward until they could cap the space. It creates a dark, enclosed interior, like a cave or something more symbolic, and the builders cut precise openings, doorways, slots in the stone. On the morning of an equinox, something happens. As the sun rises due east, a beam of light enters through the main doorway. It travels across the first chamber, and then it strikes a specific stone slab in the inner sanctuary. The light doesn't splash, it forms a sharp, vertical line, a perfect blade of sunlight that bisects the stone from top to bottom. It's a deliberate marker. It announces the moment of balance, when day and night are equal, but they didn't stop there. They designed for the solstices too. On the summer solstice, the sun rises at its farthest point north. The angle changes. Now the sunlight doesn't form a thin line. Instead, it creates a distinct, rectangular patch of light. It illuminates the edge of a large megalith to the left of the central slab. On the winter solstice, with the sun rising far to the south, another rectangular patch appears. But this time, it lights up the corresponding megalith on the right side. This is a sophisticated understanding. With a single architectural setup, they created 3 distinct solar signals, a vertical line for the equinoxes, a left rectangle for summer, a right rectangle for winter. They mapped the sun's entire yearly journey onto the stones of their inner chamber, all achieved with simple stone tools. No metal, just observation, patience, and a deep need to make the cosmic cycle visible. To stand in that dark chamber as the equinox light cuts down the stone is to feel the intention. For them, light wasn't just illumination. It was a living force, the penetration of that sharp beam into the dark, curved, almost womb-like space likely held profound meaning. It could have symbolized fertilization, the male sun entering and energizing the Earth's dark, feminine interior, or it could have been seen as divine communication. A moment when the spirit of the sun god or an ancestral force literally touched their most sacred space. The temple was a machine for capturing these moments, for making the intangible tangible. The precision at Mnajdra speaks of a tradition, not a lucky guess but a developed science of watching. For generations, they must have noted the sun's rising points on the horizon. They learned its language, then they translated that language into architecture. They built a permanent home for these fleeting celestial events. In the central Mediterranean, long before great empires rose, a small island culture was encoding the logic of the heavens into stone, creating a sanctuary where the sky itself performed the ritual. Chaco Canyon. It's in the American Southwest, a high remote butt of sandstone, a place that was a center for the ancestral Puebloan people 1,000 years ago. On Ħaġar Butte, there are 3 large stone slabs. They lean against the cliff. They were placed there not by accident, and behind them on the rock wall, 2 spirals are carved. One large, one small. For most of the year, the spirals are just there in the shade. But on certain days the sun comes into it. At noon on the summer solstice, a dagger of light appears. A thin, brilliant sliver channeled between those slabs. It pierces right through the center of the larger spiral, a perfect bisection. On the winter solstice, a different dagger of light touches the smaller spiral. And on the equinoxes, two daggers of light appear, not one. They bracket the larger spiral, one on each side. That's the sun dagger. It's not a built structure, not in the traditional sense. It's a collaboration, human intelligence working with a natural rock formation to make a precise celestial calendar. The ancestral Puebloans didn't haul stones to build a new observatory. They found a natural stage and directed the performance. They placed those three slabs with care, turning a sunbeam into a pointer, a blade of light that marked the year's turning points with accuracy. This site was likely a ceremonial calendar, a place for a few people, maybe priests or astronomers, to witness the sun's journey, to know when the seasons were turning. In that vast, arid landscape of Chaco, where the sun was a defining force, that precision held deep meaning. It connected their ritual life, their sense of time, to the cosmos directly. But the sun dagger also tells a fragile story. In the late 20th century, researchers saw the alignment was off. The slabs had shifted. Centuries of erosion, water freezing and thawing in tiny cracks, the natural settling of the butt had moved them. The phenomenon is still there, but it's changed. It's a reminder. These ancient alignments aren't frozen moments. They're dynamic records in a living landscape. The stones move, the earth's tilt wobbles slowly. What was precise 1,000 years ago isn't precisely the same now. The sun dagger shows the brilliance of ancient sky watchers. And it shows the impermanence of their physical marks. It makes preservation a modern responsibility, not just to protect the stones, but to understand the intent behind them. Before time and the elements rewrite the message entirely, the sun daggers show that alignment is a conversation, human intention meeting the natural world. Then you have the Maya. In the Yucatan jungle at Chichen Itza, there's a building that doesn't fit, the Caracol. It means the snail because of the spiral stair inside. But outside, it's a round tower on a big platform. Surrounded by right angles and pyramids, it stands out. That's the clue. This wasn't a temple for people. It was an observatory, a machine for watching the sky, and it's still precise. The design is about lines of sight. The upper tower has these narrow windows cut through thick walls. They aren't random, they're precise. From one spot inside, you could look out and frame events on the horizon. And the Maya weren't just watching the sun. Their obsession was a planet, Venus. To them, Venus wasn't just a light, it was a god. Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, was connected to it, but Venus had two sides. A fearsome side. As the morning star, it meant war. Its first appearance after being gone was dangerous, inauspicious. Kings would time their battles to these Venus cycles, thinking the god's influence would bring power. The planet's movements were tracked, calculated, feared. The Caracol shows this. One main window points to Venus's northernmost setting. Another frames its southernmost setting. Other slits line up with solstice sunsets. This one building was made to watch multiple cycles, sun and planet, from a single place. Using these fixed stone lines, Maya astronomers could predict when Venus would appear and disappear. They had a Venus calendar, 584 days long. It harmonized with their 365-day solar year in a big cycle, 104 years. This was math and cosmology built into stone. The Caracol is a shift. It goes beyond marking the sun's steady rhythm. It engages a planet's irregular dance. That took generations of watching, meticulous records in their books, advanced arithmetic. They were looking for order in the sky's chaos to predict the gods' moods. By building the Caracol, they made that knowledge permanent, operational. A ruler could come to this tower, ask his astronomers, and learn the gods' schedule. Celestial prediction became political authority, spiritual authority. The tower is stone testament. to a civilization that saw the sky not as a clock but as a living script. A divine script they were determined to read. High in the Andes, there's a piece of granite. It rises out of the living rock. They call it the Intihuatana. The hitching post of the sun. For the Inca, that's what it was, a tether, a place to secure the sun god Inti to the earth. This wasn't a metaphor, it was a vital function. A sacred one. The stone stands at Machu Picchu, a city in the clouds, and its design is a marvel. The pillar has precise angles, precise facets. On the equinoxes, when the sun is directly overhead at noon, something happens. The stone casts no shadow. It becomes a perfect, shadowless marker, a marker of balance. For the rest of the year, the shadows shift along its carved edges. They track the sun's journey north and south. It was a solar calendar, carved from a single block, but to call it just a calendar misses its power. In the Inca worldview, the sun was a living deity. Its daily journey sustained all life. The solstices were moments of peril. The winter solstice in June, the sun was at its weakest point, its farthest point. There was a fear it might keep going, that it might leave the world in permanent cold, in darkness. The Intihuatana was the ritual answer. During ceremonies, priests would tie the sun to this stone. They would hitch it to ensure its return, to ensure the renewal of the seasons, the crops, the world itself. The stone was an anchor between the human and the divine. Its placement in Machu Picchu adds another layer. The city is a landscape observatory. The Intihuatana isn't random. It aligns with sacred mountains. The Apus, which were themselves powerful deities, it also lines up with sightlines to the sunrise and sunset on critical days, so this one stone ties together three threads. The cycles of the sky above, the spirits of the mountains around, and the ritual life of the city below. It sits at the nexus, a carved piece of rock connecting astronomy, geography, and spirituality into one understanding, a holistic understanding of the cosmos. The Inca didn't just build a city on a mountain, they wove the entire mountain into a living temple. And the sky above it, and at its heart was the stone that held the sun. From the Intihuatana, the ambition gets much larger. On the coast of Brittany, in France, the landscape is rewritten. Not with one stone or a dozen, but with thousands. The Carnac alignments, more than 3,000 standing stones, set in long, parallel rows that go on for miles. It's not a building, it's a vast, open-air composition, a statement in granite, and its purpose is still a puzzle. Walking among these rows, the Menec alignments, is overwhelming. The stones start small at one end and grow larger. They form a grand avenue that pulls you forward. The labor is staggering. Communities over centuries must have been dedicated to this. Hauling, erecting, aligning these massive stones. This was a society investing its entire identity into the land. But to what end? The most compelling theories look to the sky. Some researchers think these parallel rows could have been a giant sighting device. If you stood at one end, the aligned stones would create precise corridors of view. These corridors may have framed the rising or setting of the moon at key points in its complex cycle. That cycle lasts 18.6 years. The moon's rising points swing from an extreme north to an extreme south. Tracking that would require long-term observation. The Carnac rows, maintained over generations, could have provided that permanent frame. Other alignments at the site, like the Grand Menhir Brisset, point toward significant solar directions. That stone is fallen now, but it was once the largest standing stone in Europe. This suggests the site wasn't for a single celestial body. It may have been a comprehensive cosmic map. A landscape calendar that integrated both solar and lunar time. But interpreting Carnac is challenging. It's not a chambered tomb with a single light box. This is a sprawling, multi-component complex. It likely served multiple purposes across centuries. The rows could have been ritual processional ways. Pathways for ceremonial walks during festivals. festivals tied to those solar or lunar events. The act of walking the aligned avenue, with the stones channeling your movement toward a horizon where the sun or moon was rising, would have been a powerful experience. Physical and spiritual, it connected the community's movement on the ground with the movement of the heavens above. Carnac is the megalithic impulse at its most expansive. Here, engagement with cosmic forces wasn't about building a structure on the landscape. It was about altering the landscape itself. They turned miles of terrain into a permanent interface with the sky. The stones are silent witnesses to a worldview where the earthly and the celestial were not separate realms, but a continuous, interconnected whole. The effort tells us that for these people, understanding and honoring these cycles was worth the work of generations. It was the work that defined the ambition to carve the cosmos into the landscape. You see it reach this breathtaking scale along the Nile. At Abu Simbel, a pharaoh didn't just build a temple. He commanded a mountain to become one. Ramses II, in the 13th century BCE, he ordered 2 colossal temples carved directly into the sandstone cliff. The larger one is his own, fronted by 4 seated statues of the king, each one over 65 feet tall, staring eternally across the river. It's not a prehistoric site, but it stands as a testament to that same ancient impulse. To marry architecture and astronomy and divine authority into a single statement, the engineering inside is as precise as it is dramatic. The temple stretches back 200 feet into the rock. Its innermost sanctuary holds 4 seated statues, the gods Amun and Ra-Horakhti, the deified pharaoh Ramses himself, and Ptah, the god of the underworld and darkness. For most of the year, that chamber lies in deep, permanent shadow, but on 2 specific mornings something happens, just after dawn, February 21st and October 21st. The rising sun aligns perfectly with the temple's axis. A beam of light travels the entire length of the corridor, 60 meters. It pierces the inner darkness. For about 20 minutes, it illuminates 3 of the statues, Amun, Ra-Horakhti, and Ramses, bathed in brilliant sunlight. The 4th statue, Ptah, remains in shadow. He is the god of darkness. His realm is untouched. This was no accident. It was calculated celestial theater. The dates are believed to be the king's birthday and his coronation day. The message was absolute. In this event, the sun god Ra was physically rejuvenating the pharaoh, his divine son on earth. Ramses wasn't just a king honoring the gods. He was shown as part of their cosmic cycle, illuminated and renewed alongside them. The lone statue left in shadow, Ptah, completed it. Even in a moment of solar triumph, the balance was acknowledged. Light and dark, life and the afterlife. Centuries later, this alignment faced its greatest threat. In the 1960s, the rising waters of Lake Nasser. From the Aswan High Dam, they would have submerged Abu Simbel forever. So in an unprecedented feat, the entire temple complex was cut into blocks, moved to higher ground. Reassembled, the project took 4 years. The paramount concern beyond the structure was preserving that solar alignment. Engineers and archaeologists worked to ensure the sun's ray would still strike the inner sanctuary on those 2 days. They succeeded. The relocation is an echo of the original intent. It shows a recognition. This wasn't just a pile of old stones. It was a machine for generating meaning. A dialogue with the sun that had to continue. The modern world, with all its technology, bowed to the celestial genius of the Ancient One, ensuring the pharaoh's divine appointment with the dawn would never be broken. The Big Horn Medicine Wheel is a circle of stones, limestone rocks laid out on a plateau in Wyoming. It's about 80 feet across, a hub in the center with 28 spokes going out. And around the rim, 6 smaller piles of stone, cairns. It's a map of the sky, a calendar for a people who moved. One of those cairns lines up with the summer solstice sunrise. The one opposite it with the sunset, so the longest day is framed, but the other cairns, they point to stars. to the moment a star first comes back into view just before dawn. The heliacal rising at this wheel cairns align with the dawn rising of Aldebaran, the red eye of Taurus, with Rigel in Orion, and with Sirius, the dog star. These stars return in the late spring and early summer sky. Their appearance was a signal. For the Crow, the Shoshone, the Arapaho, this was a sacred place. For ceremony and vision, but it was also practical. The stars gave a schedule. Aldebaran rising around the 1st of June meant it was time to move the herds. To start the summer hunt, Sirius rising later, that was the peak of summer heat, so the knowledge was in the stars when to be where. This is a stellar tradition. Different from the solar monuments of the Old World, here under the big sky, the stars were the primary clock. Each one was a character, a relative, a guide. This knowledge wasn't carved in stone towers. It was held in memory, passed down in stories and songs. An elder would point to a star's first light and tell its tale. That oral tradition was a living library. It connected the sky to everything, to migration, to when plants ripened, to animal behavior. The astronomy was part of the ecology. Part of spirituality. The wheel on the ground was an anchor for all that, a place to gather and reaffirm the order of things. So this wheel shows a different path. Instead of building mountains to capture the sun, they arranged stones on a high place to listen to the stars. The monument is humble in material, but the wisdom is immense. It was about harmony, about hearing the stories the stars tell each year and knowing your place in that story. The plains give way to a different map. A map for gods, Teotihuacan. Its ruins are in central Mexico, in a valley. It was a huge city. Over 100,000 people lived there, and it wasn't built by chance. It was built from a vision. The whole city is one big alignment. The main street is the Avenue of the Dead. It runs for miles with platforms and pyramids on either side. And it points 15.5 degrees east of north. That's not random. It's a choice. It ties the city to the sun's path. At the center of it all is the Temple of the Sun. A giant stepped pyramid, one of the biggest anywhere. Its alignment isn't about a solstice. It's about something more important for that valley, the zenith passage. That's the day twice a year when the sun is straight overhead at noon. There are no shadows. For the people there, that was the key moment. It meant the rains were coming. Time to plant the maize, the sacred crop that fed them all. From a certain spot on the avenue, you'd see the sun set right behind the pyramid on that day. The sun would crown the temple, then sink into it. That made the pyramid more than a building. It was a cosmic marker, a giant sundial marking the most important date for farming. But the city's design points to a more complex calendar too. Along with the solar year, they likely used a 260-day ritual calendar, a sacred count used all over Mesoamerica. It interlocked with the sun's cycle. The city's grid, the spacing of the monuments might have been laid out to track both times. The Temple of the Moon. The Ciudadela with its Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Each major structure is placed with geometric precision, probably astronomical precision. The whole urban plan seems like a model of the universe. The Avenue of the Dead could be a celestial river, like the Milky Way. The pyramids could be sacred mountains, portals between worlds. So Teotihuacan wasn't just a city where people lived. It was a physical form of a cosmic order, a place where the rhythm of the heavens set the layout of the streets, where walking the avenue was a journey through a sacred landscape. A mirror of the sun's journey, the star's journey. This alignment is profound because it's not just one feature. It is the feature. The architecture is the alignment. It shows a society that didn't just build structures to watch the sky. They built an entire world to be the sky. They tried to make heaven on earth in stone and mortar. To lock their place inside the cycles they watched, Teotihuacan built its city as a mirror of the cosmos. That's a structured, planned approach, but sometimes the marker is just one image. In southern England, there's a green hill, and cut into that hill is a giant white horse, the Uffington white horse. It's not painted on. It's carved down to the chalk bedrock, so the white stone shows through the grass. From up close on the ground, it's hard to see, but from the air or from the valley, the shape comes clear, a stylized flowing figure over 360 feet long. It looks like it's galloping. Archaeologists say it was made in the late Bronze Age, about 3,000 years ago. That makes it older than the stone circles we've talked about. For a long time, people thought it was a victory symbol or a tribal emblem, but its meaning was always unknown. Why make something so huge you can only see it from far away? Some researchers looking at the sky have another idea. Maybe the horse isn't just a horse, maybe it's a marker for the moon. The theory looks at the hill, Dragon Hill, and the horse's alignment. It's on a steep north-facing slope. Its long, abstract body seems placed for specific viewpoints in the valley. When you plot those viewpoints against the horizon, a pattern appears. The horse aligns with the moon's most extreme rising points. During its major standstill, that's the peak of the moon's 18.6-year cycle, when it rises farthest north or south. From certain spots, the white horse would seem to gallop along the horizon, directly toward or away from that lunar event. This idea is controversial. It should be. It's not like a stone corridor framing a beam of sunlight. A hill figure is more abstract. The evidence is in the landscape's geometry, not a clear light show. Skeptics say it could be coincidence, or that the main meaning was tribal, artistic, connected to a local god. That caution is right. You can't see astronomy in every old mark. But the possibility changes the perspective. It suggests celestial knowledge wasn't only in stone chambers or pyramids. It could be in vast earth art. In a living canvas of chalk and grass. If the white horse is a lunar marker, it's a different kind of engagement with the sky. It's not for precise timing, not for planting crops. The moon's 18-year cycle is too long for that. It's about mapping a grand, slow rhythm onto the land itself. It's about creating a permanent symbol. So that from the right place at the right time, it creates a relationship between the viewer, the art, and the cosmic event. The art becomes an interface. It blends artistic expression with watching the sky in a way that feels fluid, integrated with the Earth's contours. This giant horse galloping across time challenges what an observatory is. It suggests that for some cultures, watching the sky was part of making art on the Earth. The monument wasn't a tool you used, it was a vision you beheld. A vision that only made complete sense when the moon finished its long journey and rose in just the right spot, making the silent, white horse on the hill part of a much larger, moving picture. The chalk horse is a question, but in Orkney there's a circle that's an answer, the Ring of Brodgar. It sits on a narrow strip of land, a bridge between two lochs. 27 stones left out of 60. They stand inside a huge circular ditch cut right from the bedrock, a henge monument, a sacred precinct, and it's part of a landscape that's full of meaning. From here you can see the standing stones of Stenness, and on the horizon the great mound of Maeshowe. This wasn't an isolated place, it was a hub, a place in a vast ritual network. A place made for watching the sky and for being watched by it. The stones themselves are slender and tall. They make a ring of silhouettes against that wide Orcadian sky. And this ring has alignments. Specific stones frame the midwinter solstice sunset. From the circle's center, you'd watch the sun drop into a notch on the horizon, marked by one of those megaliths. That solar alignment is clear, it's powerful, a marker for the year's deepest point like its neighbor Maeshowe. But the Ring of Brodgar might have had a second purpose. A lunar one. Researchers have seen that other stones, and even some burial mounds outside the circle, they line up with points on the horizon, points that mark the moon's major standstill. That 18.6-year cycle, when the moon reaches its most extreme rising and setting points, tracking that long, slow rhythm, it requires a permanent observatory. A site maintained over generations, the Ring of Brodgar with its enduring stone circle set inside that defining ditch, it would have been perfect. It could have been a dual-purpose calendar. The solar alignments marked the annual cycle, the seasons, life and renewal, and the potential lunar alignments, they tracked a grander rhythm, a more mysterious one. Tied to longer cycles of time, maybe to ceremonies that happened only once in a generation. That sophistication tells you something about the society that built it. To coordinate the labor for Brodgar and for all the monuments around it, that required a shared vision, a communal agreement that spanned decades, maybe centuries. They weren't just farmers trying to survive, they were astronomers, theologians, engineers. They invested immense effort into creating a permanent stage. A place where cosmic events could be witnessed and celebrated. The site's location on that isthmus between waters, it makes a dramatic theater. The ceremonies held here under the solstice sun or the standstill moon, they would have been unforgettable. The water reflecting the sky, the stones framing the celestial bodies, the community gathered inside the henge. It was a full immersion into a belief system that saw the earth and heavens as one thing. The Ring of Brodgar, then, is more than a circle. It's a key piece in an integrated landscape of time. Together with the stones of Stenness and the chambered tomb of Maeshowe, it formed a complex. Different astronomical functions, different ritual purposes, distributed across the terrain, one site for the setting solstice sun, another for the rising solstice sun. And a great circle, perhaps, for tracking the moon's majestic, patient dance. This was a mapped cosmos, a Neolithic understanding of celestial order, written not on paper, but across the hills and waters of their home. It represents a peak, a society so in tune with the sky that they wove its rhythms into the very fabric of their world. Kokino is in North Macedonia. It's up on a volcanic hill. And it's from the Bronze Age, around the 19th century BCE. It's not a built structure, not stones brought in. It's a mountaintop. They adapted the mountain itself. They came to this peak and saw the potential in the rock. There were these natural stone pillars, these jagged notches in the volcanic tuff. They saw a ready-made observatory there. With very little alteration, just a few markers cut into the existing rock, they turned the summit into a precise calendar for watching the sky. It shows a different kind of genius. Not moving mountains, but listening to one. The key is the horizon. From that high point, the distant skyline is a detailed profile, hills and valleys. Those ancient astronomers identified specific notches in that natural skyline, notches that lined up with the sun's extreme positions. Then they carved matching stone markers on the summit rocks. These markers created sightlines. If you stand at a certain observation point and you look across a specific stone marker, your gaze goes through a precise notch on the far horizon. On the summer solstice, the sun rises in one of those notches. On the winter solstice, it rises in another. The equinoxes, spring and autumn, are marked by two more. The system is elegant. It required deep, long-term knowledge of the landscape and the sun's path, but very little physical construction. They used what the mountain already gave them. There are also special seats carved right from the bedrock, thrones. They face the critical eastern horizon. These were almost certainly for the watchers. The priest astronomers, they would have sat in these stone chairs, maybe for hours in the cold dawn, waiting to confirm the sun's arrival in its appointed gate. That observation would then set the ritual calendar for the community below. Kokino is an example of a global practice. From the deserts of the Americas to the mountains of Europe, cultures often chose prominent natural high places as observatories. A mountain peak gives you an unobstructed view. Its natural features can be fixed reference points. It's pragmatic. It uses the landscape's existing geometry. It shows celestial observation wasn't always about monumental labor. Sometimes it was about perception, seeing the sacred clockwork already present in the world and just adding a few human-made indices. To make its ticking audible to the whole community, it's a partnership between human intellect and the enduring shape of the earth. The mountain observatory at Kokino used the land as a clock. But in the Mississippi floodplain, a civilization built its calendar from the forest. That was Cahokia. 1,000 years ago, it was the largest city north of Mexico. Tens of thousands of people lived there in earthen neighborhoods, trading goods from across the continent. And at its heart were these massive earthen mounds, platforms for temples and for the elite. West of the biggest mound, Monk's Mound, archaeologists found something, not more earthworks but the ghosts of posts, circles of them. They're called wood henges. These weren't stone circles, not built to last millennia. They were built from cedar posts, tall, straight posts, set deep into the ground in a wide ring. The wood would rot over time and the posts would be replaced. The circle was renewed again and again. It was a living calendar made from a living material. From a central post, an observer, a priest, would look across the circle. The aligned posts framed specific points on the eastern horizon. On the equinox, the sun would rise directly over one post. On the solstices, it would rise over others, marking the sun's farthest journeys north and south. It was a public instrument, a giant sundial made of timber, telling the city when the seasons turned. For the Mississippian people, the sun wasn't just a light, it was a primary deity, often shown with a forked eye in their art. The sun god was central to their cosmology and to their ruler's authority. The great chief, the great sun, was considered a descendant of this celestial being, so tracking the sun's path wasn't just practical for agriculture. It was a sacred duty. The woodhenge provided the dates for the city's ritual life. It told them when to plant the maize, the beans, the squash that fed everyone. And it told them when to hold the great ceremonies, ceremonies that reaffirmed the social order, the cosmic order, games, feasts, processions, all scheduled by this solar clock. The choice of wood is significant. In a land rich with forests, it was the logical material, the sacred material. Unlike the enduring stone of European megaliths, the woodhenge required maintenance. Its perishable nature meant the calendar had to be actively cared for, the knowledge had to be passed down, the circle had to be physically renewed by each generation. That created a direct relationship with the cosmic cycle, a hands-on relationship. The community wasn't just observing an alignment built by ancestors long gone. They were participating in its upkeep. They were keeping time alive. Cahokia's woodhenge shows that the impulse to build celestial calendars is universal. But the expression is cultural. Here was a sophisticated urban society, complex social hierarchies, vast trade networks, and they chose a simple, elegant solution. They used the trees from their world to build a bridge to the sun. It was a communal space defined by the solar cycle, a place where the entire city could sink its labor, its worship, its very life to the reliable rhythm of their most powerful god. The posts are gone now, but their reconstructed patterns stand as a testament to a people who look to the horizon not with mystery, but with a precise understanding. A reverent understanding, they wove the sun's journey into the daily heartbeat of a great city. The sun's rhythm guided Cahokia, but in a place that's now completely dry, that same rhythm was once a lifeline. There's a basin in the Egyptian Sahara cracked earth called Nabta Playa. Today it's a forbidding desert, but around 7,000 years ago it was a savanna. Grasses grew, seasonal rains filled a lake, and cattle-herding people came there. They didn't build cities, they were nomadic, and yet they left behind one of the most profound astronomical sites on Earth. A small circle of stones and a series of aligned megaliths dating to around 4,800 BCE. That makes Nabta Playa older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramids. It's one of the oldest known deliberate astronomical arrangements anywhere. The centerpiece is a stone circle about 13 feet across. It's not grand in scale, but its intention is colossal. Inside, there are 4 sets of upright stone slabs, arranged in pairs, and these pairs align to the cardinal directions north, south, east, west with remarkable accuracy. That alone shows a sophisticated grasp of geometry, but the astronomy goes further. Outside the circle, they placed a single, isolated stone slab. From the center of the circle, looking toward that outlying stone, you'd be sighting the point where the summer solstice sun rose 7,000 years ago. The alignment accounts for the slow wobble of the Earth's axis. It was precise. These people also created other lines of megaliths, rows of stones that seemed to point toward the rising positions of key stars. Stars like Sirius and the stars of Orion's belt. Their first appearance just before dawn, their heliacal rising, would have signaled the imminent arrival of the summer monsoon rains. The lifeline for their herds, for their way of life. This changes the story. The dominant theory for a long time was that systematic astronomy and the monumental architecture that goes with it emerged with settled agricultural societies. Farmers needed to know when to plant, but Nabta Playa was built by pastoralists, cattle herders. Their survival depended not on planting dates but on predicting the rains. Knowing when the seasonal lakes would fill, when the grasslands would green, their calendar wasn't for sowing, it was for moving, a nomadic clock etched in stone on the shores of a vanished lake. The implications are profound. It suggests the human impulse to track the heavens for survival may be even more ancient and widespread than we thought. That it arose independently among people who followed their herds, long before the first seeds were sown in permanent fields. This sophisticated knowledge of solstices and stars, developed in the Saharan savanna, raises a question. What happened to these people when the climate changed? When the Sahara began to dry out around 3,500 BC, the Playa Lake vanished, the grasslands retreated. The cattle herders would have been forced to move. Many scholars believe they migrated toward the one permanent source of water they knew, the Nile River Valley. They brought their knowledge with them, their understanding of the solar year, their reverence for cattle, which became sacred in later Egyptian religion. Their skills in stone working and celestial observation. It's a compelling idea, though still debated, that the roots of pharaonic Egypt's astronomical achievements, its precise calendars, its solar theology may have been nurtured not in the fertile Nile mud, but in the now silent sands of Nabta Playa. This small, unassuming circle of stones isn't just a calendar. It's a potential origin point, a whisper from a green Sahara, telling us that watching the sky is a human story that began not with empires, but with herders looking up at the stars, searching the horizon for the first sign of rain. The Almenda's stones are on a gentle slope in Portugal. They're not a perfect circle. The shape is more like an egg, a stretched oval made of granite. There are 95 stones left. Some are upright, others lean. It's the largest stone circle on the Iberian Peninsula, but the real story is in layers. This wasn't built all at once, not in one lifetime. It was a work that kept going for 2,000 years, a monument that grew and changed with the people using it. The earliest part started in the late Neolithic. That was about 6,000 years ago. The builders set up a simple double circle first, with smaller menhirs. It was probably an open space for gathering, a place for a community to meet outside. Then centuries passed, and in the Chalcolithic period, they added new stones. Bigger ones, they expanded the layout, reshaped it into that distinct oval. Some of these newer stones were carved with dimples, circles, wavy lines. Maybe for stars or eyes or serpent shapes. Those carvings are a language we don't have anymore, but they show the meaning was getting deeper. the site was being looked after. Its significance was being reinforced, redefined by the generations that came after the first builders. The alignments here are subtle, worked into the land. Certain key stones point to the equinox sunrise. On those mornings of balance, the sun would have come up lined up with specific menhirs, marking equal day and night. But there's also evidence from the stone positions that points to an interest in the moon's long cycle. The major lunar standstill, that 18.6-year rhythm of the moon's most extreme rising and setting points. To track that, you need a permanent place watched over many lifetimes. Almanders used for millennia gave that continuity. It became a long-term observatory. A place where you could see solar time marked by the equinox and lunar time marked by the grand standstill. This changing design makes Almanders a powerful example of a living monument. It wasn't a static relic, it was an active part of the cultural and spiritual life of the region for ages. Its meaning wasn't fixed. As new people came or as knowledge grew, the site was adapted. Stones were moved, new ones placed. The celestial signals it captured, their interpretation might have shifted. A stone that once marked a solar event for farmers could later have been seen as a lunar marker for a different ceremony. The circle became a palimpsest, like a manuscript written over and over, each generation adding its own layer of understanding to the stone, and that challenges a simple view of these places. We often want one answer, a single purpose, but Almanders resists that. It speaks of tradition and change, a sacred space that stayed central even as the world views around it transformed. The stones held the memory of the sky, and each community that gathered there found its own way to listen. In the coniferous forests of northern Poland, there are these stone circles at Odry. They're not like Stonehenge, not like Carnac. They're smaller, moss-covered rings, but they show a real understanding of the sky, built by a culture that doesn't get much attention. Most people think the Goths built them, a Germanic people moving through the area in the 1st or 2nd century, but some researchers think they could be older. From an earlier, unknown culture, whoever it was, they left a clear mark, 10 stone circles, nearly 30 burial mounds arranged across the forest. The stones aren't huge monoliths, they're modest boulders, local stones, placed with intention to form these precise rings, and it's the arrangement that matters. The positions of the circles relative to each other, to the landscape, specific sightlines through the centers of certain circles, they align with the rising and setting sun on the solstices. You could stand at the central point of one circle and watch the midsummer sun rise directly over the center of another, distant circle, using the architecture itself as a giant aiming device. There's also evidence, though less definitive, for lunar alignments. Certain stones within the circles might mark the moon's extreme positions during its long standstill cycle. This combination, solar and potential lunar tracking, it places Odry in the same tradition as the great megalithic observatories of the West. It shows this knowledge wasn't confined to one region. It was a pan-European language of the sky, spoken in stone from the Atlantic shores to the dense forests here. The burial mounds within the complex are significant. They create a direct physical link between observing the heavens and venerating ancestors. The circles for measuring cosmic cycles sit right alongside the mounds for the dead. That connection suggests a worldview where time, the cosmos, and the community of the living and the dead were all part of a single, continuous whole. By building their observatory amidst the resting places of their forebears, they anchored the eternal cycles of the sun and moon to the enduring memory of their lineage. The celestial events they marked weren't abstract. They were moments that perhaps bridged this world and the next, witnessed in the company of ancestors. The obscurity of Odry is itself a lesson. Sites like Stonehenge or Newgrange capture global attention, but places like Odry remind us the map of ancient astronomy isn't complete. Many aligned sites are probably still hidden, in forests under farmland waiting for the right question. The impulse to build in harmony with the heavens wasn't a rare spark in a few famous locations. It was widespread, a fundamental human response to the cosmos, one that flourished in great ceremonial centers and just as authentically in the quiet clearings of a Polish forest. Each newly understood site like Odry adds another voice. It deepens the appreciation for that shared, profound journey our ancestors undertook, all looking up at the same sun, the same moon, seeking their place in the story written across the sky. The stones at Odry, they watch the forest sky, but on Easter Island, Rapa Nui, the statues watch the sea. The coast is lined with these platforms, the Ahu and the Moai on them. They almost all have their backs to the ocean. They face the villages, the land, their guardians looking inward, except at one place, Ahu Akivi. Here 7 Moai stand together. And they're looking out. Their backs are to the island, their eyes on the empty Pacific horizon. That reversal, it's deliberate. For a culture that carved 1,000 statues, breaking the pattern means something. This site has a different story. The platform sits inland on a slope. Its orientation is precise. Studies suggest the Ahu itself is aligned to the setting sun at the equinox. On those days when day and night are equal, the sun would sink into the sea right along the platform's central axis. But the statues add something. The 7 Moai gaze toward a specific point on that horizon. The point where the sun sets during the austral spring equinox. They're not just facing the ocean, they're facing a moment in time, a celestial event. To get this, you have to understand the people who came here. The Polynesians were the greatest navigators. They crossed thousands of miles of open ocean in canoes. They had no compasses, no charts. They read the stars, the swells, the flight of birds. Their star compass was a mental map of the heavens. The sky was a navigational grid, a sacred guide. When their ancestors first sighted Rapa Nui, it was because they could read that celestial script, so a land-based equinox alignment for a seafaring culture. The equinox is a global moment of equilibrium. For navigators, it marks when the sun rises and sets due east and west. It simplifies celestial reckoning. It's a reset point. Ahu Akivi, with its statues gazing toward that sunset, may have been a monumental calendar marker. It could have signaled a time to prepare for fishing, for bird migration. But given the Polynesian psyche steeped in navigation, the meaning likely went deeper. There's a connection some researchers propose. The 7 statues are uniform, a cohesive group. Local oral tradition speaks of them representing 7 legendary explorers, scouts sent by the founding king, Hotu Mata, before the main migration arrived. If that tradition holds a memory, then the alignment becomes symbolic. The statues, the scouts face the open ocean their people came from, and they face the equinox sunset, a key navigational benchmark. They become stone incarnations of the first explorers, forever watching the horizon, forever aligned with the event that guided their voyage. They link the island to its origins, to the sea journey, to the cosmic knowledge that made it possible. Ahu Akivi expands the map of ancient astronomy into the Pacific. It shows that even on this tiny, remote island, the drive to encode celestial order into the landscape was irrepressible. They expressed it not with stone circles or pyramids, but with the form they mastered, the monumental human figure. They turned their ancestors or their mythic scouts into eternal witnesses to the sky's rhythm. The site is a fusion, a solar observatory, a potential calendar, a memorial to exploration. It says that even after their epic voyages ended, after they settled this farthest land, the Rapa Nui people never stopped looking to the horizon. They just built sentinels to do it for them, forever aligned with the sun's path home. There's a place in southern Armenia, up on a high plateau, Zorat's Kera. Sometimes they call it the Armenian Stonehenge. It's a field, really, with hundreds of basalt stones. Many of them are standing. They're arranged in a rough circle, spread out over a wide area. But the thing about them, the unusual thing, is the holes. More than 80 of the stones have these holes, carefully bored circular near the top of the stone. That's what started the debate, the theory, that maybe this was an ancient observatory, but not for watching the sun, for pinpointing specific stars. The argument for that is pretty direct. You look at the holes, they're not random. They're cleanly drilled, maybe an inch or two across, and they go all the way through the stone. So the idea is they were sighting tubes. An observer would stand in a specific spot, maybe behind one stone, and look through the hole in another. That narrow line of sight would frame just one tiny piece of the horizon. And over generations you could watch, you could record which stars first appeared in that little portal or disappeared as the seasons changed. It's a different kind of precision. Not about solstices, this is about stars, specific stars. The theory points to alignments through these holes with stars like Vega, Deneb, the Pleiades cluster. If that's right, then Zoroastrianism was a specialized kind of astronomy, focused on the fixed stars, but a lot of archaeologists see it differently. They see a necropolis, a city for the dead. Excavations show a central burial mound, cist graves, remains of structures, a funerary complex from the Bronze Age into the Iron Age. In that view, the standing stones are tomb markers, parts of a memorial site, and the holes, they could have had a simpler use for tethering animals during ceremonies, or for securing offerings to the stones. The stellar alignments, the skeptics say, could just be coincidence. When you have so many stones in a field, some of them are bound to line up with something in the sky. This whole debate, it captures a tension in archaeoastronomy, the challenge of separating function from symbolism. In that world, they might not have been separate. A stone marking a grave could also be a window to the stars. A place for honoring the dead could also be a place for communicating with the cosmos they joined. So the holes are the puzzle. Were they practical or celestial? Could they have been both? The debate forces a kind of balance. It reminds us that the impulse to track the heavens was always filtered through local needs. Through beliefs, through materials, Zoroastrianism may never give one clear answer, and maybe that's the point. These ancient places resist our categories. They were layered. A single stone could be a grave marker, a ritual object, and an astronomical instrument, all at once. Its true purpose wasn't one thing we've lost. It was a whole way of seeing the world, one we're still learning to understand. The question of a single stone fades. At Carnac, the alignment was everything. The main axis of that place, built over 2,000 years, it runs from the sanctuary of Amun-Ra, out through a forest of columns, to a gate in the west. And that line was set with precision, celestial precision. On the winter solstice, the setting sun would align with that axis. Its last rays would shine straight down the long hall, that corridor of stone pillars. Like a petrified forest, that light would travel hundreds of feet from the outside world into the deepest darkness of the inner sanctuary. It would illuminate the shrine of the god. Briefly, brilliantly, the visual effect during a ceremony, it would have been breathtaking. You have the priests conducting rituals in that shadowy hall as the sun begins to set. And then a transformation, a blade of intense, low light cutting through the columns, turning each pillar into a stark silhouette, creating a pathway of fire on the stone floor. That light would have seemed alive, purposeful, a divine visitor walking straight into the heart of the temple. For the Egyptians, this wasn't just a pretty effect. It was theology in stone and light. The winter solstice marked the sun's weakest point, its symbolic death before its rebirth. By aligning the temple to capture this sunset, the priests created a direct connection. They showed that the sun god, in his most vulnerable state, was still connected to his earthly house. The architecture guaranteed it. This precision started at the very beginning. In the foundation rituals, before a single stone was laid, priests used simple tools, a sighting instrument called a merkit, a notched palm rib, a plumb line. They would observe the stars, the circumpolar stars that never set, to find true north. From that, they could calculate the solstitial axis. The ceremony of stretching the cord was a sacred act. Witnessed by the king and the gods, it tied the temple's layout to the cosmos. The building wasn't just placed on land, it was anchored to the sky. Carnac's long history, from the Middle Kingdom through the Ptolemaic period, it shows the consistency of this principle. Pharaoh after pharaoh added pylons, courts, obelisks, but the core solar alignment of the main axis was never altered. It was the immutable backbone of the entire complex. This reflects the Egyptian concept of Ma'at, cosmic order, truth, balance. The temple was a machine for maintaining Ma'at on earth. Its alignment to the solstice sun was a physical proof. Proof that the king's rule and the gods' favor were in harmony with the rhythms of the universe. The sun set along that line year after year, century after century. Confirming the cosmic order held, the temple stood as a permanent promise, a guarantee that the cycles would continue, that the divine would forever commune with the human realm. Along that beam of solstice light, Loughcrew, the hills of the witch, from up there you can see for miles, and on these hills you have the cairns, passage tombs. Built by the same people, the same culture that built Newgrange, but Newgrange is about the solstice, the drama of it. Loughcrew is different. Loughcrew is about balance. The equinox, that moment when day and night are equal. The main one is Cairn T on Carnbane East. It's this mound of white quartz on the highest point. You go inside through a narrow passage. It leads to a chamber, a cruciform shape. It's a tight space, cool, still, and on the back wall there's a single stone slab. Covered in carvings, circles, lines, cup marks, solar symbols, carved 5,000 years ago. For most of the year, that stone is in shadow. But around the equinox, spring and autumn, something happens. The sun rises due east and the light enters the passage. It travels down the corridor, a beam of light. It gets brighter, and then it reaches the chamber. For about 20 minutes, that beam moves across the carved stone. It lights up the symbols one by one. The central spiral, maybe the sun itself, it gets bathed in light. If you're in that chamber, it would be overwhelming. You're not just watching the equinox, you're inside it. The light performs it. It brings those carved suns to life. It connects you to the people who built it, to that idea of cosmic balance. The alignment is just as precise as Newgrange. It took the same understanding, the same skill. But the feeling is different. The solstice is about extremes, the death and rebirth of the sun. The equinox is about harmony, equilibrium, a day of perfect symmetry. A moment of stability. By building Cairn T for this light, they showed they valued that balance. They saw it as a sacred pivot point. Loughcrew has many cairns on different hills. It might have been a whole ceremonial landscape, each one with its own relationship to the sky, a network of alignments, but Cairn T's event, it feels more personal. More participatory, not a public spectacle, probably for a select few, priests, elders. They would enter the darkness to witness the light reclaim the symbols. A private conversation with the cosmos in a stone chamber on a hilltop, reaffirming that in all the cycles, all the change, there were these moments of perfect, illuminated balance. The pattern is clear now. 25 monuments all over the world, all saying the same thing with their alignments. Chankillo in the desert, the Audrey circles in the forest, Newgrange in Ireland, Intihuatana in the Andes. The message is the same. These weren't random piles of stone. They were deliberate, they were expensive. They took everything a community had, moving earth, hauling giant stones for miles, carving precise angles into granite. That was work for generations, and they did it to tie their world to the sky, to anchor their survival, their spirit, to the clockwork of the heavens. That shared impulse, it tells you something about a human drive, a drive to find order out there, and to make that order solid, to make it something you could touch right here. It was a science, a slow science, watching the horizon notch by notch, year after year, until you saw the pattern. And it was a spirituality, because for them, the sun wasn't gas. The moon wasn't a rock. They were alive. They were gods, ancestors, guides. The line, there was no line. The solstice light that told you to plant was the same light that woke up your god. That combination, the watching and the reverence, that's the lesson. It breaks the old idea, the idea of primitive people just stumbling around. They weren't that. They were astronomers, master astronomers with no telescopes. They were engineers with no metal. They were philosophers, asking the big questions about time, about death, about where we are. And they answered in the most permanent thing they had, stone. They looked up at the chaos of the night sky and they saw a pattern, a story, and they built their part of it right into the land. So we would find it, so we would remember. What they left is an invitation to look up, sure, at the stars they followed, but also to look around at the stones still standing there. They're bridges between our wonder now and their understanding then. They're a reminder that searching for meaning in the cosmos, that's not a new story. It's the oldest one, written in light and shadow on stone, waiting for anyone who looks.